Okay, so I've been producing these pannable PDFs, as I would call them, PDF files for a long time. The basis of this and the idea of this really was a frustration with PowerPoint. And so really I started to think, and I was always interested in PDF files because back in the day, you know, saving things in different formats meant that as software changed, you lost your work. And so, for instance, you know, I've been using computers since the mid-90s when they really started to come into design. And the only files I can still look at are places where I've created PDFs. And so I think PDF is a great format. So I came up with this idea, which is that once you forget the idea of a sequence or a narrative of slide after slide, if you treat the image space as a canvas that you can move around, it's easier. Now, of course, this is exactly what Miro's been doing. And so students who use Miro will recognize this format. And so this is really a method to try to get a higher resolution kind of Miro type space for us to present with. And so here, for example, and the way I've generally used it is I always am just using a PDF viewer. And now I'm using Acrobat Pro because I have a license, but otherwise any PDF viewer you can use. And the key thing about it is, and the workflow is, that you're creating the PDF in InDesign, or it could be in any other graphics desktop publishing software. And then you're exporting that at a high enough resolution that you can zoom into the images. And then you're viewing it in Acrobat, in PDF Viewer, Acrobat PDF Viewer, or in Acrobat Pro, not in Preview, you have to use that piece of software. And the key thing about it is that if you go to and again, I understand that it's different in other languages, so you're just going to have to find the equivalent location. But if we go to File, in Mac, if we're basically going to Preferences, and you have to find it on PC in the equivalent space, Preferences, then in here you'll see there's under the tab, the categories, or the tab on the side, there's one that says General. And the key thing in here is to have this button that says use single key accelerators checked. And so here I am going to check it, use single key accelerators to access tools, because that allows you to zoom and pan with the image used full screen. And so I'm going to do this first, and I'll show you an example. And so use single key accelerators. That's the only thing you have to remember to do first. Then you go, okay. Now, if I press the equivalent of Command or Apple key L, it goes full screen. So when it's full screen, I can then change the tools by pressing, without a control or anything, Z to get the zoom tool or the magnifying glass. And so, for example, in this lecture I gave from 2002, you know, I was working it so that basically I'm having, you know, I've got here is the area I'm zoomed into. And then what I can use is I can either press and hold the space bar down to get the hand tool, and then I can pan across, let go, and then back comes the zoom tool, or I can just press H or H without the special caret, without control, H, and then I can pan. If this is not fitting, I can press Apple key or control minus, and that zooms a bit out, and that's one way of doing it. And then I can pan more. If I want to, I can type Z to get back to here, and I can then zoom into a space like that. Again, I can hold the space bar, which brings up the hand tool, and I can pan. And if I want to, then I can also then press Control 0, and that will then give me the whole screen. I could also, for example, press Control plus to zoom in. Space bar, holding the space bar and then panning. Control minus lets me zoom out a little bit. And then Control plus lets me zoom in. Or, you know, so if I want to go out a few layers, I can go Apple key or Control minus to get back out, or I can go Control 0 to get to the whole screen, zoom back into where I want to work, then go Control 0 to go back out, zoom into the next place I want to work. And so as you can see, what I've done here is I've set it up so that in a way you can see the whole page, and you can then get my entire scope. Now, if we, I've got other examples. One of my, my sort of first major public one outside, when Catherine Mosbach invited me to speak in Barcelona in 2005. This is a lecture I gave, and so in that situation, what I did, again, Control L to go full screen, Z for zoom, without, and that lecture I basically embedded these images, and so you can tell that the whole lecture is about change. That's me going out again, and then Z zooms into the first project I talk about, and then I can then zoom into the actual images that I'm working from. Now, this is the key thing, to get those images at that scale. Again, this resolution is actually not high enough. We have to be able to embed them in such a way that when you zoom into them, you have a proper and decent resolution that you can see, so that you can both get them working at this scale, or you can get them at a more detailed scale, for example. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about now. So let's just think about this. This is just one long InDesign page. And so, for example, if I go to InDesign now, here's another lecture. If we look at that one, here's the one I'm going to talk about. So I'll zoom through it. This is actually a presentation of a project. So it's probably more pertinent, and you can see how, in a way it's stepped through to allow me to present the process. And because this scheme was about process, I'm presenting the process. It's not always the way you should present. So it starts off with a kind of analytic stage, and so I can say here is this is 2000, this is actually 2002, so it's a long time ago now. And so I'm panning again, shift, or not, space bar, and then dragging. And here is a kind of a, if you've got a trackpad, you can also, and it's a Mac, you can also use the normal trackpad gestures to zoom out and zoom in again if you want to. And so here is, this is how I was sort of panning across and explaining this process. These are all just embedded images. Here's how we first came up with the, this process of trying to understand how this topography, this artificial topography, should be made, and then on to working with clay, then working with vacuum forming. And again, this is a long time, so it's not how we would do this anymore. And so just to give you an example of how that works, here is that particular image. And so here I am in InDesign. And so if we look at the page setup, this is really important. You'll see that the page setup for this originally was 600 millimeters wide by 100 millimeters high. So it's important to realize that we're not thinking about a piece of paper here. I've done ones of this that are 1.2 meters, 1200 wide by 100 tall. It's about the space that you need for your presentation. And when you look at your Miro board and think about Miro, just think about doing that here. What we're doing is we're then, so I'm saying basically, if you did 600 by 100 millimeters, that's not too bad. That's not a bad size. You just got one sheet, one page, because we're working on that one page. And so you can see here that all of these images are just placed like you normally would place images. And then they're organized in that sort of way. And so if we now go to the next process that's really important, this is just InDesign. There's nothing special about this. You can put text on it. You can do all the things you've been doing in Miro onto this space. But the key thing is about resolution. So this is an old project, and the images are quite large on this project. And so it won't necessarily be the same size. So what I do is I basically go to export. I'm going to go to my desktop here, and I'm going to call it Queen's Lecture Test, and I want a PDF. Now, I mentioned to some students that with GIFs, you might have to play around to see how GIFs work. You might have to do a bit of searching. I'm pretty sure you can do it. You might have to click on them to get them to run. So we go save, and you'll see this is the key important thing here is optimize for fast web view can be a dangerous option because it might reduce your resolution. But otherwise, we're working here, and you'll see it says I've got this down to 900. Let's just play around to show you what I'm talking about. Let's do one at 300 DPI or pixels per inch. Again, it doesn't matter whether this is not now a science. This is now experimentation. It's not saying exactly what the resolution is. We're going to do a number of tests. And so when it comes to this, what I'm actually going to do is, actually, you know what? I'm going to cancel this for a second, and I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to say export and do it again. I'm going to actually call it, I generally do it this way. So it's Queen's Lecture 300. So I put the resolution in the title to remind myself, okay, that's when it's 300 DPI. And then I go and I'll say, all the settings should still be there. No, they're not. So I changed them to 300, average downsampling, images above 300. That just means that it's anything that's not that large, it's not going to process it. Because again, file size is an issue, but these days processing power is pretty high. Image quality medium, the reason that's really a question about when it says image quality, that's a lot about color. And so this is where some of the compression will happen because it will try to reduce the amount of colors. Now, if you've got really rich colors, you'll want to keep the image quality at high or maximum. But again, it's a kind of play between file size, etc. I'm going to stick with medium. So then when I export it, let's have a look at what it looks like at 300. It's done. Let's go and find it on the desktop. Where is it? Desktop, pardon me. So here it is here at 300 DPI. Now, how does it look? Let's see what the resolution looks like. You see how that there is actually now a bit blurry, right? Now, the images, interestingly, this is an old file, so I was not working at super high resolution. But you can see how that's not really right because you want to zoom in on the smallest images and check the resolution. So let's now, so that's not good enough, but let's look at what the file size is. This is an old file, that's 1.8. For yours, I wouldn't imagine that they're going to be any less than 50 or 60 meg. And don't panic too much. In actual fact, Adobe can handle, 100. Once you start to get over 100 meg, it starts to become more difficult, but it's still just can be slower at the initial loading. 60 meg is fine. So let's now do another one. Let's see what happens if I export again. And this time I'm going to go File, Export. Let's go the other way. Let's do one at 600 DPI. So I'm changing that to 600. So now I've got another example. So then I go Save. Compression, let's just change it to 600. So you see, it's not like science I'm doing here, because don't forget, we're working on a screen. We're not printing this out. We don't have to worry about the printers, how much it can print. We're not necessarily all about even uploading this. We're just doing this in this sort of way. So let's try that. See what happens when we do 600. So taking a little bit longer, but let's look at that. You see the resolution now is actually, the file size now it's uploading. So yes, it's 5.2. So now let's look at that. So again, you see it's taken a little bit longer. We've got a little bit of hesitancy over here. Let's just zoom in over there. You see that now the resolution is better there. So if we compare that to, we compare that to say, I'm just going to to the other one, then we'll find that that in actual fact, the other one, you remember, was a lot less the resolution. This was a lot more pixelated, And so if I go again now and we can still see, say these images are still a bit sketchy. You can see how there's still a little bit of pixelation. Again, if I'm working at that scale, say if this diagram is always going to be, say I'm going to work at the scale where I'm zooming into, I'll never zoom in more than that, then maybe that's enough because, they don't look too blurry at this scale. If I zoom right in there, they are blurry. If I'm not actually ever going to zoom right in there, it doesn't matter so much. So this is also where you need to think about, if we look at that whole diagram, and really this is an explanation of a kind of a system, microclimatic condition, horticultural aspects, I think I was mixing up my spelling of bosques between Spanish and French, etc. representation surface, etc. That's a column. In a way, I want to see those whole diagrams. So maybe that scale is fine. But what if I do want to zoom in there? Well, in that case, I need to say, well, no, I still need to get a better resolution. So then I go back into the file and we do the same. And let's say that we're going to export this one this time at 900. Now, sometimes I find these days, if it's a piece of paper like this and I've got really tiny images, I can go up to 1200 DPI or 2400 because I'm trying to get into these tiny images. So this is what I'm saying. It's a kind of like a process of experimentation to find the sweet spot, you might call it. Okay, so let's put that up there. Okay, so let's export that. Let's see how that looks. Taking a bit longer. Let's see what happens to the file size now. Oh, still just, sorry, it's just synchronizing to my iCloud. That's gone to 8 megabytes. Again, this is an old file. So let's now look at it. Okay, and see, it's taking a bit longer to load, and sometimes parts might not load or seem to immediately load like this. If that happens when you're in the lecture, you can zoom into an area and it'll force it to load. And then when I zoom back out, you'll see the whole thing. So if it looks like it's not all loading, don't panic. Sometimes it's just not previewing for your monitor. But let's have a look here now. Okay, you can see now how that image now is quite tight. And so that gives you the example. And so this is the process I utilize. When I do this, I make sure that those single C accelerators are set up, because in a way, you're not showing the fact that you're using Adobe. Adobe is hidden because it's, we've done Control L here, right? And so Adobe is hidden. So these tools, the Z and the H, as in letter H for hand, those two tools are really all you need. And then the shortcuts, and they can get you around, Control 0 to get full screen again. And so, as I said, the key thing is that how we create the file and how we view the file, because the viewing part is the magic, because people think to themselves, what are you viewing this in? Is it in Acrobat? What is that? They're so used to PowerPoint. Just to do it again, that's about making sure that your settings are set to under general, use single key accelerators. Now in French, I don't know what that, it's the first one here. It might be the first one. Okay, so that's my process, and that's what I'm suggesting that we do for this presentation.